Good morning and welcome to another episode of Quarantine Conservation. And today, it's Friday, April 24th, and we are going to be celebrating today by planting a tree because it's Arbor Day. So behind me here, you can see we have a Coosa dogwood that's in need of planting. My family and I always like to plant a tree every year on Arbor Day, and so in our landscape, we thought we needed a little bit more spring color, so we decided to go with a Coosa dogwood. So one of the first things you want to look at when you're deciding on planting a tree is the site selection that you have. So take a good inventory of your home and your site. Is it dry? Is it wet? Do you have full sun, which is 6 hours, part shade? Do you have well-drained soils? And what trees do you have in your yard? Because you don't necessarily want more of the same. You want to create a diversity. Make sure to try to stick with native trees as well. For your area, you're going to deal with less disease and less pest problems over time, and they're a lot easier to manage as well. The other thing to consider about tree planting is what species you'd like. So there's lots of different varieties out there. We try to stick with native trees just because of the fact you're going to deal with less pest, less disease pressure, less insect pressure over time, and they're typically well suited to the environment around you. There are some really great hybrids, as this one behind us is. A Coosa is a hybrid, but it still has a great wildlife uses here in Indiana, so that's why we went ahead with it instead of our native. You can see behind me we do have a native dogwood in the landscape already, so we're just gonna add this one as well. But there's different trees, different sizes, different heights. No matter the size of your home or your acreage, you can always find a tree to suit your needs, and so we encourage you. When planting trees, there's a few tricks of the trade that we're going to share with you today to make sure you have the best success you can. So one of the best kept secrets about planting trees is it's not necessarily the depth of the hole, but you want that hole wide. We're breaking up this soil profile. As you can see, it's well drained loam soil, but it is a little bit compacted. So we're going to turn around and make this hole wide and try to give our roots as much area around the tree to be able to start to grow. These trees, whether they're balled or burlapped or a fabric sack, or if they're coming in a potted container. All right, this tree was purchased from a local store. It was in a 3-gallon container. So you can see here that we brought it out of its container, and we're going to take a little bit of a look of how we need to prepare this tree once it's out of its container to be able to start. When trees grown in containers, they often have roots that start to circle the side. They have nowhere else to go but to circle around. But these trees over time, it may not be the first couple of years, but over time, near year 5, 7, or 10, these roots will eventually grow very large and start to girdle the tree as it puts on girth. So we want to make sure that we try to get these roots in the right direction. So one way that we can do that is to literally just kind of take a little bit of a saw, and we're going to saw off some of these roots here on the edge before we plant. The other thing you need to find when you're looking at especially balled and burlap trees is you need to make sure that you find the actual part of the trunk that meets the roots. That's mentioned as the root flare. That's where it starts to get wider, and that needs to be just under the soil line. So sometimes in balled and burlap trees, this can be several inches under the amount of dirt because of the way that those balled and burlap trees are harvested. So you can see here there's a lot of roots on top of this 3-gallon container, and we're going to take some of those off as well because we want the underground roots, and we don't necessarily want those spreading roots on top because they have a more risk of girdling as well. So here's a good example of a root that's already on its way to be a potentially girdling root. You can see here where, because it hit the wall of the container, it started to bend at an odd angle. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that that doesn't happen. And we're going to clip that root right there because we want to make sure that that doesn't girdle in the future. By trimming these roots and getting in here a little bit, it is safe. The tree will emit a hormone that allows it to put more roots down. So don't worry too much. The trees are resilient, and we're just trying to make sure that it has the best chance possible. So you can see here that we made the hole about 1.5 to 2 times wider than it needed to be to make sure that these roots get the best lateral room to grow as possible. So make sure, it's kind of a rule of thumb, so to speak, to have that hole wider and not deeper for proper tree planting. It's been raining here all day, so as you can see, our dirt's pretty damp, but you still want to go ahead and make sure you water it in. And what that's going to do is get rid of any of those air gaps in there and make sure that those roots and this tree gets a good drink of water as it settles into its new home. You'll want to make sure and keep this tree watered pretty regularly over the next couple of days, and make sure that it's getting an inch of water a week. You may be irrigating this well into the fall and through the winter for the first couple of years, because trees are kind of slow to put on new root growth. So you'll want to make sure that they're getting ample water amounts in times of limited rain. The next thing you're going to remember to do is to mulch around your tree. So this keeps the weed pressure down, so that tree is not competing for different water and nutrients, but it also is going to keep the soil a little bit cooler in the heat of the summer, a little bit warmer in the winter, and it helps keep moisture around that tree where it needs to be. Beware of the mulch volcano. So you can see here, my lovely assistant is making sure that this mulch is spread out several inches away from that trunk. So this is what we call a mulch donut, and that's what you want to do. So everybody likes donuts more than volcanoes, mulch included. So make sure that you mulch away from the trunk of that tree to make sure that you aren't trapping moisture at that spot. The last thing you want to do for your newly planted tree is to make sure it has a good anchor. So before those roots get established, we want to make sure that it doesn't get damaged in a windstorm, or protect it from animals that may be coming by. So we're using the stake that was provided with the container. It's just a wooden stake. We made sure that we anchored it pretty far into the ground for a couple of inches, and we're only staking the lower half of the tree. We're using tomato tape right now to attach that until we can get a better anchor on down the line. But this will be a good remedy for the first few weeks as this tree starts to put on some new growth. All right, and that's it. We have our newly planted tree. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Go out here on Friday, celebrate Arbor Day, and plant a tree. So happy quarantine conservation. Have a great weekend.